We've cancelled your first-class seat. The system moved you to 44E, back of the plane. Madison said it gently, as if it were a routine travel update, as if it were no big deal. But behind her, dozens of people were listening. A few turned their heads slightly, others sighed. No one asked what was happening, no one reacted. She stood there, the woman in the ash-grey coat, hand pulling an old wooden suitcase with a worn leather handle. She said nothing, she simply looked. Not angry, not confused, not even surprised. The way she looked at Madison didn't resemble a passenger complaining about service. It looked more like someone silently logging yet another pattern she'd seen too many times, in too many places. Her name was Ariana Ellington, but at that moment no one at Crescent Bay Airport knew that, and no one cared to. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, she didn't have an expensive watch. There was nothing about her that signaled she was anyone of significance. In fact, her voice, soft, articulate but tinged with an African accent, had made Madison frown the moment she heard it. She didn't know why, but she felt the need to adjust Ariana's placement. And so that's exactly what happened. No apology, no awkward glance, just a swift operation. Scroll down the list, change seat, reprint the boarding pass. It happened as if Ariana had never been assigned seat 2A in the first place, as if she had never deserved to be there. She took back the boarding pass, eyes lingering on the small text, 44E, a seat crammed next to the lavatory. No one knew that the woman standing in front of them was someone who, with a single message, could make Airlines lose one of its biggest corporate partners ever. But today, Ariana wasn't here to flex her power. She came to see how many people still believed that a glance, a skin tone, or a way of speaking was enough to judge someone's worth. And she got her answer in the very first minute at Gate 12. If you find this story worth reflecting on, subscribe now so you won't miss the truths no one talks about. But everyone should know. Madison glanced at Ariana once more, this time from head to toe. Hair neatly tied back, a slate-colored scarf with no visible logo, low-heeled leather shoes worn at the edges. Everything about her was quiet. There was nothing on Ariana that screamed first class. No designer handbag, no gleaming membership card, no overly eager smile inviting leniency. And somehow it was precisely that, the refusal to perform luxury, that seemed to unsettle Madison the most. Behind the counter, Ethan Rhodes, a trainee still in his probationary period, glanced at the internal system display. The screen clearly read, Ariana Ellington, seat 2A, first class, check-in complete. He turned toward Madison, lowering his voice slightly. Are you sure there was a passenger request? Madison didn't look at him. She replied quietly, evenly, not everyone aligns with the brand image. A simple sentence, but layered with meanings no one had to explain. Ethan hesitated, then turned away. He was new, and this was the first time he had witnessed a passenger being downgraded, without any official reason. Ariana said nothing, but in the brief second when Ethan passed by, her eyes lingered on him. Just for a moment. No blame, no plea, just a look. One that made something tighten in Ethan's chest, like he had just turned away from something deeply important before realizing what it was. Elsewhere, Jenna Morales, a young flight attendant just starting her shift, was reattaching her name tag to her uniform. She stood not far away, having seen everything unfold. Her hand trembled slightly, but then Jenna turned away. She didn't want to get involved. She hadn't passed her final review yet. At this airport, silence was sometimes the price of survival. And at that exact moment, a message was sent, from a glass-walled room 30 miles away. Lauren Chen, ready. The airport loudspeaker droned with the same repetitive announcements. Under the cold, white lights, people stood in line out of habit, a quiet procession with vacant eyes, brushing past one another as if no one truly existed. Ariana was still standing there, in the middle of the crowd, like a distorted shadow cast by airport lighting. Seat 2A, her seat, had just been downgraded to economy due to a technical issue. But no one produced any paperwork. No one apologized. There was only Madison, with that faint, calculated smile, continuing her work as if nothing had happened. Then a man walked up. He was tall, early 40s, crisp white shirt, navy blazer, neatly combed hair, sunglasses tucked at his collar, the kind of man the system always defaulted to as a frequent first-class flyer. He didn't need to smile, didn't need to introduce himself. He simply held up a gleaming gold card bearing the Airline's logo. His voice was calm but authoritative, nearly commanding. "Is there still a first-class seat available?" Madison glanced at the screen, just for a second, then turned back and smiled. That smile, Ariana saw it clearly, wasn't one of service, but of confirmation. A confirmation of power. Yes, seat 2A just became available. Just one sentence. But to Ariana, it felt like a razor slicing through the calm facade she had so carefully maintained. No one questioned it, no one verified, no one asked why the broken seat had suddenly become available again, simply because the one asking was a white man in a blazer. Ethan Rhodes, just a few steps away, stood frozen. He glanced at the screen. The name Ariana Ellington had just vanished from the first-class list. No reason. No notes. He swallowed hard, fingers resting on the keyboard, about to say something, but stopped. He was still in probation, and Madison had warned him, "Watch and learn to stay quiet, Ethan. This isn't the place for idealism." Across the cabin, Jenna Morales was preparing luggage for VIP guests. She happened to catch the seat switch and saw Ariana. Jenna's eyes flickered. She knew she had just witnessed something wrong. Her hand trembled slightly as she reattached her name badge. Jenna Morales, crew member. As if even that name was starting to feel distant from the woman she once believed herself to be. Ariana turned away, walking slowly toward the waiting seats. She didn't react, didn't argue, didn't rage, didn't resent. Only her gaze as she left the counter, a gaze so cold it seemed to freeze the air between her and Madison. No words were spoken, but a message had been delivered, slicing the space between those who enforce the system and the one who owns the entire system. Madison turned back to her work, avoiding Ariana's eyes. But she knew, without question, that look would haunt her. And just like that, the moment seat 2A was granted to someone else, Ariana's seemingly invisible power began to move. Somewhere else, inside a glass high-rise in the heart of Portbridge, a phone vibrated. Lauren Chen, Ariana's executive assistant, received a brief message from her boss. Just one word: begin. The waiting area at Gate 12 was silent in an artificial way. Everyone stared at their phones, headphones on, eyes fixed on screens, as if by refusing to acknowledge what had just happened, it would cease to exist. Ariana Ellington took the last seat in the row. The cold metal pressed against her back like a silent reminder. This seat is not meant for you. Her hand rested on an old brown handbag, the kind people easily overlook. No one paid attention, no one asked, no one suspected that inside that quiet, unremarkable bag lay one of the most powerful access cards in North America's financial sector. Ariana didn't open a laptop, didn't make a call, didn't check her email. She simply sat and watched. Her eyes followed every staff member, every passenger. Every gesture, every glance, every whisper. Nothing escaped her, as if the entire terminal was unknowingly testifying before an invisible tribunal they didn't know existed. Madison, the one who had just bumped her to economy, continued checking in guests. Each smile she offered was disturbingly identical. Nothing sincere, nothing reflective. Madison believed she was right, because the system always stood behind her. But Ariana knew the truth. Systems are not invincible. They're created by people, and they can be dismantled by someone who knows the power of staying silent at the right moment. Jenna Morales passed by, pulling a suitcase. Their eyes met, for less than a second. Just 1 second. But Jenna saw it clearly. There was something different about this woman. She wasn't like the others who got ejected from first class. No flustered look, no outrage, no attempt to prove her worth. Only observation, and a silence so cold it chilled the air. Victor Ames, the shift manager, appeared at the counter. He said nothing, just glanced at the passenger list on his iPad, looked at Ariana briefly as if something felt off. but then turned away. Ariana took a slow, deep breath. Then, she pulled a small notebook from her bag. Not just any notebook. It was her emergency action ledger, the handwritten version which she'd insisted on keeping in case action is required without leaving digital traces. She flipped to page 24. A heading emerged. Plan C, Infrastructure-Based Dissolution of Shadow Partnerships. Ariana skimmed the page, emotionless. At that moment, her phone vibrated in her bag. A message from Lauren Chen. All departments are ready, awaiting authorization. Ariana didn't reply. Not yet. The system needed to expose itself first, before she struck. She closed the notebook gently, placed it back in her bag, and remained seated, like a rock in the middle of a rushing crowd. Still, unshaken, cold. No one knew that every minute she sat there at gate 12 was another piece falling into place, in the shape of a coming revolution. The loudspeaker echoed faintly in the distance, its sound dusted with a sterile coldness. Air Amara Flight 217 to Boston will begin boarding at gate 12 shortly. Ariana remained seated. She had become part of the scenery, a forgotten still object within a perfectly running system. But her eyes never stopped moving. She observed everyone who passed by, and she remembered. An elderly woman who had clearly witnessed the incident glanced at Ariana, then quickly turned away, pretending to check her phone. A young father, holding his daughter, paused for a second, a flicker of sympathy in his gaze. But then he walked on, as if he had seen nothing at all. A group of airport staff walked past. They laughed and whispered casually, but when they saw Ariana, one of them suddenly fell silent. The others distracted themselves, eyes drifting away. No one mocked her, no one insulted her, but no one spoke up. Ethan Rhodes stood behind the counter, his hand hovering over the boarding pass scanner. His finger froze mid-motion because a question had crept into his mind uninvited. If I say nothing, am I any different from someone complicit? He looked over at Jenna, the young flight attendant standing nearby. They didn't speak, just exchanged a fleeting glance. It was brief, but inside that glance, there was enough regret, enough fear, and enough helplessness. Jenna turned away. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap on her uniform. She thought of her mother, also a woman of color, once denied treatment at a clinic because she didn't have premium insurance. Jenna knew too well what it felt like to be seen as not enough. And yet she stayed silent, not out of malice, but because the system had taught them silence is survival. Victor Ames, the shift manager, approached Ethan. "Is something wrong?" he asked, voice low but firm. Ethan shook his head. "No, just a few minor glitches in the boarding layout." Victor nodded slightly, asking no more. He knew, they all knew, but each one in their own way chose to step back. Ariana knew this too, and she did not blame them, because some battles can't be won by shouting, they can only be won by silence, timed right, and action delivered by the right person. Ariana tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something deep within. Then she stood up, a subtle movement. But those who were paying attention went still, because something in her posture was no longer that of a downgraded passenger, it was the stance of someone who had just made a decision. Gate 12 bustled as if nothing had ever happened. Jenna Morales kept her head down, checking the seat manifest. Ethan Rhodes stood at the terminal, repeating the same lifeless motions. Madison Greer kept smiling, chatting, greeting passengers who were more fitting for the brand's image. And then a familiar shadow approached from behind. Madison turned. Ariana Ellington was standing right in front of her. No signs of rage, no raised voice, no confrontation. Just a woman, staring directly into the eyes of the person who had humiliated her in public. Madison instinctively stepped back. "What do you need?" she asked, her voice quivering slightly, still trying to sound composed. Ariana didn't answer right away. She glanced at the name badge pinned to Madison's chest. A single look, enough to make the air feel like it had frozen over. Then she leaned in, her voice low, loud enough for Madison to hear, but soft enough that no one else could interfere. This story doesn't end here. A pause. But you might. Madison blinked. The words sliced through her like a cold blade. Before she could react, Ariana turned, walking away step by step, slow but steady, out of the boarding area. Ethan watched her leave, unable to speak. Jenna stood frozen, as if hypnotized by the woman's extraordinary calm. In Ariana's eyes, there was no sadness, no bitterness. Only one thing remained: certainty. Victor Ames saw her exit. He checked his watch. 9:32 a.m. Exactly 1 hour later, everything began to fall apart. 9:36 a.m. Just 4 minutes after Ariana Ellington walked away from Gate 12. The Airlines flight schedule monitors at Crescent Bay International Airport began flickering with system errors. Flight 217 to Boston, indefinitely delayed. Flight 338 to Atlanta, cancelled. Unable to load passenger information, Madison Greer blinked, staring at the control panel display. She hit refresh 3 times, no response. She called the tech department. No one picked up. At other gates, flight attendants scrambled. Seats were double assigned. Passenger manifests didn't match the stored records. One VIP traveler complained, "I purchased seat 2A. Why is someone else sitting there?" The attendant could only stammer apologies. Meanwhile, inside Airmara's internal operations office, the membership ID authentication system crashed across the board. An IT specialist shouted, "They've just had their access revoked from the finance partner side." The shift supervisor's eyes widened. Which partner? Ellington Global Holdings. The room fell dead silent. Victor Ames, the airport shift manager, stepped into the control zone. His brow furrowed. "What's going on?" One staff member replied softly, almost in a whisper, "It looks like they just lost all integration privileges from the executive management system." Victor froze. He understood all too well. Airmara's entire automation infrastructure, from routing, identity verification, to loyalty account syncing, had been developed under a tech partnership with Ellington Global Holdings. And if Ellington pulled their support, it was like ripping the spine out of a standing body. Across the terminal, Ethan Rhodes fumbled through the backup manifests, but Ariana Ellington's name had completely vanished from the passenger database, as if she had never existed. A chill ran down his spine. Only now did he begin to understand. That woman wasn't just a wronged passenger. She was the epicenter of a seismic event about to swallow the entire system whole. And Madison, frozen in front of the error-streaked screen, began to tremble. Not because of the system failure, but because of something deeper. Instinct. She could feel it. Something massive was bearing down on them. And it had all begun with that final sentence from the woman she had tried to erase. A high-rise glass conference room on the 27th floor in the heart of Portbridge's financial district. The sun had yet to rise, but the lights inside had been on since 5:45 a.m. Ariana Ellington sat at the head of the table. No coat, no jewelry, no excess emotion. Only a closed laptop in front of her and a cup of black tea gone cold. Around her were seasoned, composed faces. Lauren Chen, executive assistant, scanning the logistics partner matrix. Raymond Chu, head of North American legal affairs, reviewing contract termination files. Ayako Fujimoto, strategic advisor, silent, nodding subtly each time Ariana signaled. There was no need to raise her voice, no need to emphasize a point. Ariana spoke just 4 words, enough to set the entire machine in motion. Pull every single contract. Lauren nodded. Her fingers began executing the pre-drafted email cascade prepared the night before. To Airmara Airlines Executive Board. Due to breaches in ethical standards in operations and service, Ellington Global Holdings is terminating all technological, financial, and logistical partnerships with your company, effective immediately. No negotiations, no reinstatement, no delay. This message was engineered to sever all 3 of Airmara's survival pillars: flight booking system infrastructure, premium customer data access, mid-range investment capital from Ellington Financial, In less than 30 minutes, market alerts began to leak. Air loses top-tier strategic investor. Over 43% of Air loyalty point system is inaccessible. Stock price drops 11.4% in opening hour. Raymond Chu looked at Ariana concerned. There will be backlash. Shareholders will demand an explanation. Ariana remained silent. She tapped her fingers lightly against the glass table, then spoke, as soft as a breath. We're not doing this to retaliate. We're doing this to remind them ethics are not optional. Lauren looked at her, awaiting the next directive. Ariana rose. She took with her a tablet. Inside it, a prepared list of alternate airlines, pre-cleared and vetted to replace Air in Ellington Logistics' global distribution network. An old world was being cut off. A new system was beginning to take shape, and she didn't need to make a public statement to announce it. Because to Ariana Ellington, the most powerful moves never need to be loud. 10:42 a.m., 19th floor, Air Airlines headquarters, Portbridge. Madison Greer sat alone. No phone, no handbag, only a glass of cold water on the table, untouched. The room was sealed, 4 walls of glass overlooking a foggy skyline. But inside, the air was thick, suffocating. The door opened. 3 people entered. The head of human resources, the director of customer relations, the vice president of operations, the only one who didn't look at her. They didn't introduce themselves, didn't sit down, didn't sugarcoat it. Why did you reassign Ariana Ellington's seat? Madison swallowed hard. Her voice shrank. I felt she didn't align with the first-class brand image. Someone took notes. No one responded. Madison tried to compose herself. She was dressed very simply, no premium luggage. And she didn't present as a VIP. The vice president finally looked up, his voice for the first time, and in your view, a woman of color, not dressed in designer clothes, couldn't possibly be a first-class passenger. Madison froze. She had no answer. The director of customer relations placed a file on the table. Inside, a list of 14 formal complaints from passengers on the same flight, reporting discriminatory and disrespectful conduct at Gate 12. The head of HR spoke, voice low and firm. Do you know who she is? Madison lowered her head, whispered, I didn't know. A silence followed. So long it ached. Then the sound of a projector slide filled the room. An image appeared on screen, Ariana Ellington, chairwoman, Ellington Global Holdings. Below it, the press release issued that very morning. Ellington formally severs all partnerships with Air Airlines due to ethical misconduct in operations. Madison's face turned pale. The vice president closed the meeting with a single sentence, "This story is not just a personal mistake. It is the coldest testimony to the kind of culture we've been building." Then he stood, signaling the meeting was over. Madison remained seated, unmoving. She knew her career no longer had a seat to return to. Late afternoon at Air internal operations office. The scene was quiet. Rows of empty desks left vacant after that morning's emergency meeting. No one spoke loudly. People moved with their eyes. Jenna Morales, the young flight attendant from that flight, sat alone in the crew lounge. In her hand, she clutched a handwritten letter. Her handwriting trembled, but every word was clear. I can't stay silent any longer. I saw what happened at Gate 12. I heard the way Madison Greer spoke to Mrs. Ariana Ellington, and I looked away because I was afraid of losing my job. Jenna walked to the office of the flight crew director. She handed in the letter, then bowed her head deeply. When she looked up, she didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply said, I accept responsibility, but I also ask to tell the truth. At the same time, in a quiet corner of the tech wing, Ethan Rhodes, the young check-in clerk from that day, opened his personal laptop. He reviewed the video from the internal security camera. He had once considered deleting it, for his own safety, but now he uploaded the clip into the internal complaint management system, along with a full technical report signed with his name. One line stood out. The seat reassignment for Ariana Ellington was not a system error. It was a manual override initiated from Madison Greer's account. Ethan hit send, then exhaled. No applause followed, no headlines, just a single soft ping from his inbox. A message from an anonymous address. You did the right thing. LC. Ethan smiled faintly. He knew exactly who it was. A single drop doesn't overflow a glass, but many drops, daring to fall together, can form a wave. For the first time, the seemingly untouchable system at Aramara began to unravel from within. Monday morning, at the headquarters of Ellington Global Holdings, Portbridge. Inside a quiet, minimalist, walnut-paneled conference room, Ariana Ellington sat at the head of the table. In front of her was an 8-page strategic partner review report, with appendices. On the cover, one bold line stood out: Comprehensive Ethics Audit of Transportation and Aviation Partners. Ariana didn't speak a single word for the first 10 minutes of the meeting. Executives, advisors, and department heads took turns presenting. From crisis communications to market impact analysis. Only after all had spoken did she finally look up and say, "We're not asking for apologies. Because apologies don't change systems. We ask for accountability." A single mouse click echoed. On the large screen behind her appeared a chart listing 7 airline partners sorted into 3 tiers. Compliant, under warning, terminated. Aramara Airlines was marked in red. Beside it, 3 damning bullet points: violation of passenger conduct toward multiracial clients, concealment of internal complaints, no structural reform following the incident. Ariana gave a slight nod. Lauren Chen, her assistant, stood and read the decision aloud. Ellington Global Holdings hereby terminates all global partnerships with Aramara Airlines, effective 72 hours from this notice. The room was silent. No applause, no celebration, only resolution and the erasure of retreat. Ariana stood, gracefully but with weight. Don't let anyone tell you we're overreacting. Doing what's right has never been too much. Haven Ridge Summit Retreat, a secluded lodge tucked deep within the pinewoods outside Portbridge. No press gates, no signboards out front, only a small hand-carved wooden plaque. Private access only. Friday afternoon, 14 black SUVs moved silently down the gravel path. Inside them were senior representatives from North America's top logistics firms, investment banks, supply chain networks, and commercial airlines. People who had never been summoned into the same room. Until today, they were led to a 2-story stone lodge hidden among the trees. Inside, Ariana Ellington was already waiting. No blazer, no elaborate makeup. Just a charcoal turtleneck, and eyes that looked like they'd already seen 5 years ahead. No projection screen, no PowerPoint. Before each attendee was a slim printed dossier with a plain logo-free cover, bearing only one line: ethics not equal to optics. Ethics are not appearances. Ariana stood at the center of the room, surrounded by a quiet circle of wooden chairs. Her voice was low, steady, and deliberate. "I'm not here to fix anyone's mistakes. I'm here to dismantle a culture we've all stayed silent about for far too long." She gestured to a side wall where a hand-pinned chart was displayed, a timeline of discriminatory incidents anonymously reported across the transportation sector over the past 5 years. No names, no company logos, just raw data. A logistics executive broke the silence. "We already have internal systems in place to handle these cases." Ariana cut in. "Not enough, because internal systems are always designed to protect the internal." She walked slowly toward the window, gazing out at the mist-laced forest. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "We don't need to fix old rules. We need to write new ones, Dash. Rules where those who lack integrity will have no seat left to flip." An older woman, representing the insurance sector, nodded slowly from her corner. A seaport CEO, long known for his icy demeanor, finally spoke. "If we join, who leads?" Ariana answered without blinking. "No one leads. There's only a shared standard. And real action." Outside, the rain had begun to fall. Software, steady, unrelenting. The first rain of a changing season. 3 weeks after the Haven Ridge Summit. The city of Portbridge continued spinning as usual. But on the top floor of Aeromara Airlines headquarters, the first fractures had begun to show. A leaked email, an anonymous employee group launched an internal account called At Beyond the Gate. Dozens of posts began to surface, suppressed reports, discriminatory internal messages, a priority upgrade policy with covert racial color codes. The board of directors went into panic mode. The PR department scrambled to release statements. But it was too late. CNN Business opened its morning broadcast with the headline, "A Domino Collapse of Silence." As the region's largest airline loses nearly $300 million in just 48 hours. The CEO of Aeromara announced his resignation at an impromptu press conference. But no applause followed. Investors stood up and walked out mid-session. Meanwhile, at Crescent Bay International, where it had all begun, Madison Greer approached her workstation, only to find her employee badge had been deactivated. She stared in confusion, tried scanning again. No beep. Just a cold message on screen. Access denied, terminated account. The man standing next to her, Victor Ames, shift manager, said nothing at first. Then, in a calm, quiet tone, "You are permanently barred from all Aeromara systems. Partner branches have also been notified." Madison looked around, eyes pleading. But every colleague turned away. No one defended her, not a single goodbye. Because everyone knew she had become the symbol of a system now, rotting from the inside out. Ariana Ellington didn't speak to the press. She didn't grant exclusive interviews. She didn't post on social media. Her office, on the 47th floor of Ellington Global Tower, remained lit every early morning. She still arrived at 6:30 sharp, as always, still brewed her own coffee, still wrote by hand, with a blue fountain pen. Instead of a press conference, she issued a memorandum of ethics, sent to over 300 global partners. It wasn't long, just 2 pages, and it began with a single sentence. If we agree that money does not discriminate by skin color, then the services that accept money must not do the opposite. What followed were 3 new policy clauses in Ellington Global's partnership framework. 1. Any organization that violates standards of human dignity, even by a single individual, will be removed from the entire supply chain within 48 hours, non-negotiable. 2. All management-level personnel at partner companies must enroll in Equity in Action, a 6-month training program co-developed with independent sociologists. 3. Each year, a customer who has experienced injustice will attend the Global Partner Summit, not to accuse, but to offer perspective. No one dared to oppose it, because no one wanted to become the next Aeromara. The following month, a major airline, Sky North, proactively reached out to Ariana, pledging to adopt the entire set of new standards. Several logistics giants began drafting their own internal ethics codes, modeled after Havenridge. No photo went viral, no video trended, only an industry quietly shifting course. And at the center of that transformation stood a woman who had never needed revenge. Because she wasn't fighting to win a battle. She was fighting to redefine how respect should be built. Early morning in Portbridge, sunlight streamed through the frosted glass of the top floor of Ellington Global Tower. Ariana Ellington sat alone in the conference room. No advisors, no assistants, only a cup of jasmine tea and a phone with a draft message open. She typed slowly --, as if each word had been forged from the years she'd stayed silent, then pressed send. The message was delivered at the same time as an internal email sent to all senior managers at Ellington Global. Every silent act is a brick. Today we're not tearing down walls, we're rebuilding, with courage. Elsewhere in the world, Ethan Rhodes began his first day in his new role. In Ellington Global's corporate ethics division, Jenna Morales prepared to speak at an international summit on courage in the service industry. Victor Ames, once the quiet shift manager, now stood before students at a local college, giving a talk titled "Choosing Right When No One's Watching." None of them became heroes, but all of them began again, better. And Madison Greer, no one knew where she had gone. Only a letter arrived for Ariana, no sender's name. The handwriting was uneven. The final line read, I should have asked who you were. Not who you were on paper, but who you were, in how you never needed to prove it. Ariana read it. She didn't reply. She simply folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, already filled with others just like it. A gate that once shut in her face was now a corridor opening for thousands more. And if you ask what changed after this story, the answer isn't law, it isn't media, it's this: an industry began to listen. Because one woman, once seated silently in the very last row, chose to stay silent no longer. There are people who don't need to shout to be heard, who don't need to get angry to demand justice. They simply stand, quietly, and make the entire system fall silent in return. Ariana Ellington didn't break down a wall, she simply refused to lay another brick on an old one. She didn't expose anyone, didn't destroy anyone, didn't seek revenge. She just rewrote the principles and stepped onto a path where respect wasn't a condition, but the starting point. Because sometimes, power doesn't come from raising your voice, it comes from knowing. You no longer need to prove you belong. And when one person chooses the right silence at the right moment, the whole world begins to listen. If you believe the world needs more stories like this, subscribe and leave us a message. Because one day, you may find yourself standing before your own Gate 12. And when that day comes, you'll know you are not alone.